My name is Corinne Halstead. I'm 48, and for 15 years I've worked in a glass tower in downtown Cleveland that smells like burnt coffee and ambition. My title is Senior Compliance Liaison, which is just a fancy way of saying I'm the person who stitches together the wires nobody else notices until the whole building goes dark. No one remembers to invite me to happy hour. No one puts my name on the pitch decks. But when the system hiccups at 2 in the morning, I'm the one crawling inside its ribcage, tightening bolts the executives don't know exist. Invisible. Yes, but I've kept the lights on longer than any of them have kept their marriages. That morning started like any other 3 monitors humming. 2 cold cups of coffee. My hair pulled too tight because I'd been up since dawn reading legalese. On the corner of my desk sat a post-it note written in my own rushed hand, Ask Legal about Clause 9C. I'd circled it in angry red months ago, but today it caught my eye in a way that made my stomach shift. Clause 9C, just another piece of fine print in the Macrovia merger, the $300 million deal the company was worshipping like a second gospel. My clearance, my signature, my protocols, every one of them was hardwired into the process. Without me, no merger could close. Yet the new crop of executives strutted around like they were the architects. Not me, the quiet woman in compliance. I adjusted my glasses, scrolled through the integration logs, and reminded myself keep the documentation tight, the systems clean, and my head low. That's how I'd survived this long. Still. The post-it stared back at me like it knew something I didn't. Across the office, voices rose in that familiar mix of swagger and nerves, project managers puffing themselves up, interns blasting music too loud. I kept my corner, invisible, steady, unglamorous. The invisible bridge. By the time the calendar pinged with an all-hands meeting request from HR, I shoved the post-it under my keyboard. I didn't know it yet, but that small square of paper was the fuse already lit. The HR calendar invite said mandatory all-hands. Compensation realignment update. I'd seen enough of those over the years to know it rarely meant good news, but this one felt colder. At 10 sharp, we were herded into the biggest conference room, the one with gray walls and the smell of dry erase markers. Cheryl from HR read from a script about strategic restructuring and aligning compensation bands to market standards when the numbers hit the screen. My chest tightened. My salary, 15 years of loyalty, was being slashed by 60%. No warning, no conversation. Just a number in a spreadsheet presented like weather we all had to accept. People around me whispered, some angry, some relieved they weren't the ones on the chopping block. I just sat there, still. I pressed my hands together under the table so no one would see them shaking. I thought of the Christmases I'd worked through, the funerals I'd missed because a server migration wouldn't wait, the birthdays I'd promised my nieces I'd make up for. All of it. Apparently. Worth less than half of what I was yesterday. I didn't cry. Crying would have been a gift to them. Instead, I straightened my back, took notes like the model employee they'd forgotten I was, and walked out when the meeting adjourned as if nothing had cracked open inside me. Back at my desk, the office buzzed with forced cheer. A few managers clapped each other on the back, already framing this as leaner, smarter operations. That's when I saw him for the first time, Tate Mallory, the new COO, mid-40s, jaw like it had been carved by a branding team, suit too sleek for Cleveland's weather. He stood near the glass wall, grinning as he spun phrases about legacy rot and modernizing culture. People laughed at his jokes, hungry for his approval. I sipped what was left of my cold coffee and kept my eyes on my screen. If there was rot in this building, it wasn't the systems I maintained. It was the arrogance now holding the microphone. 3 hours after the salary announcement, Cheryl appeared again at my cubicle. She wasn't smiling. Behind her stood another HR associate with a clipboard and a man whose eyes didn't blink enough to look human. Corinne. Can we speak privately? They guided me into a side room I'd never noticed before. Windowless, with a humming air vent and no water offered. Cheryl slid a manila envelope across the table as if she were handing over evidence. The words inside blurred together redundancy. Shifting competencies, realignment. I understood enough I no longer had a role. My position was dissolved. My badge and laptop had to be surrendered before 3 o'clock. I nodded once, slid the papers back into the envelope, and stood. There was no scene, no protest. I walked down the hallway, every step echoing louder than I intended. Eyes turned away as I passed. No one wanted to catch the contagion of failure. At the front desk, I stopped short. Among the lost keys, half-dead office plants, and memos taped to the laminate surface, there was a printed photo of me. My own face stared back, grainy and flat, with red marker scrawled across the bottom, "Do not let her back on the floor." The breath left my lungs, not because of the job they could take, but because of the insult, the deliberate erasure of everything I'd carried for them. 15 years of service reduced to a warning sign. I walked back to my desk, palms cold, heart pounding so hard I thought my chest might give way. My assistant, Kyle, looked up from his monitor, barely 25. Awkward ties, sleeves always rolled too high. His lips formed silent words. "I'm so sorry." I managed a small nod, slid my badge into his hand, and whispered, "Keep it. Maybe it'll remind you who really kept the lights on." Then I lifted the cardboard box I'd filled with a mug, some notebooks, and a tin of mints. No speech, no threats, just the sound of the elevator doors closing behind me as I left the building in silence. I set the cardboard box from the office on my kitchen table and stared at it like it might hiss if I opened it. The mug, the notebooks, the mints, it all looked foreign, as if it belonged to a stranger who'd once lived here. I let it sit untouched and went to the hallway closet. Behind the winter coats and the broken printer I kept promising to fix sat a black fireproof file box. My fingers hesitated on the latch. I hadn't opened it in nearly 2 years, but I'd always known this day might come. When the lid creaked back, the familiar rows of folders stared up at me, labeled in my neat handwriting, legal, clearance, protocols, red flags. I pulled out the one marked contingency. Inside were copies of federal protocols, audit notes, and my own annotations scrawled in red pen, near the middle, tabbed and underlined twice. Was the clause I'd circled months ago? Clause 9C? Termination of named liaison without formal substitution and recertification voids, compliance status, and suspends the legal standing of acquisition protocol. Plain English if they fired me without replacing me properly. The entire Macrovia merger collapsed under its own weight. The acquisition would be nothing more than a $300 million paperweight. I ran my thumb along the margin where I'd written in the dark during some endless call with legal no liaison. No deal. Memories flooded in Christmas Eve server crashes. Nights I patched failing integrations while executives posted selfies from ski resorts. Birthdays I missed so the system could stay alive. All those years of sacrifice, erased with a single manila envelope. But here, buried in a clause most of them had never read, was the truth they couldn't erase me? Not legally, not structurally. The anger that had knotted in my chest at the sight of my photo on the security desk settled into something colder. Not grief, not despair. Precision. I closed the folder, locked the box again, and set it firmly on the table. They thought I was gone. They had no idea I was still the bridge, and the rulebook said the bridge was irreplaceable. The folder sat open in front of me, Clause 9C glowing like a flare in the dark. I didn't hesitate this time. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized years ago, though I never thought I'd need it outside routine audits. Daniel Adler, came the calm, low voice of my attorney. He'd been with me since my early days at CoreLink, the one who handled the paperwork executives never read. "Corinne, what's happened?" "They cut my salary by 60% this morning," I said flatly. "By afternoon. They escorted me out. No notice. No substitution filed." I heard the pause, the rustle of paper. "Clause 9C, he murmured, almost to himself. You're still listed as liaison on the Federal Registry. That's right, I said. My hands no longer shook. And I want to change that. He exhaled, and I could almost picture him adjusting his glasses, the way he did before delivering bad news or, in this case, precision. We'll file a revocation, immediate, time-stamped. Once it's logged, there's no way around it. Minutes later, I was sitting at my dining table with my laptop open, Daniel on speaker. The Federal Liaison Registry page glowed cold blue. Together we filled in the fields. Name Corinne Halstead. Status revoked. My cursor hovered over the button. You're certain? Daniel asked. I've never been more certain. I clicked. A confirmation ID appeared on the screen, stamped with date and time. Effective immediately. I no longer represented CoreLink in any capacity. Without my signature. The Macrovia deal was nothing but smoke. I leaned back, heartbeat steady, and unlocked my Secure Vault app. Inside was the key store entry tied to my clearance, the digital handshake that validated every integration. I selected it, tapped delete, and watched the line vanish. Not a password, not a file, a key that could never be replaced. It was a clean cut, surgical and final, for the first time that day. I felt air return to my lungs. They had fired me like I was disposable. But now, the bridge they thought they'd burned was the one they could never rebuild. The first alert landed before midnight. A system log pinged my phone with a blunt red banner. Handshake mismatch third-party credentials not recognized. I didn't need to check twice. The revocation had propagated through the registry, just as Daniel said it would. By morning, the trickle had become a flood. My inbox, still linked to my personal vault for monitoring, filled with auto-generated errors. Integration failed, compliance key. Invalid, transaction suspended. Lines of code I had stitched together over years were now unraveling in real time. I imagined the scene inside CoreLink's offices, project managers scrambling, engineers cursing at terminals, legal assistants running down hallways with binders clutched to their chests. In Slack channels I no longer had access to, someone would have typed the words out loud, Clause 9C. At 10:07 a.m., my phone rang. Blocked number. I declined. 30 seconds later, it rang again, this time flashing CFO, CoreLink. I let it buzz out. The voicemail icon blinked. When I played it back, his voice cracked with the effort of control. Corinne, listen, the Macrovia team won't move forward. They say the merger is off until your compliance clears. This isn't something we can fix internally. Please call me. We need you back in the building. Then the sound of him slamming a desk before the line cut. 2 minutes later, another message. $300 million. Corinne, do you understand $300 million? Call me back. I set the phone face down on the table. For years, their voices had dictated my weekends, my holidays, my worth. Now I let the silence thicken around me. A text buzzed. Kyle, what's Clause 9C? Everyone's freaking out. Did you know about this? I read it twice, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I put the phone back down without answering. The coffee on my counter had gone cold, but I lifted the cup anyway. Outside, traffic hummed like nothing had changed. Inside CoreLink, the walls were already beginning to crack. By the second morning, the silence had grown brittle. Then the email arrived. Subject line, revised compensation package. I opened it slowly, already knowing what I'd find. The HR manager, someone who'd never bothered to remember my last name in 15 years, wrote with sudden warmth. They were prepared to double my salary, reinstate me immediately, and award me a strategic liaison title with enhanced authority. All they needed was my acceptance, signed quickly, to stabilize ongoing negotiations. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was the sharp release of someone who has seen the trick before and no longer cares. They hadn't respected me when I held the bridge together. They only valued me now that the bridge was gone. I clicked forward and sent the message to Daniel. My note was short, draft, something clean. An hour later, his reply slid into my inbox like a scalpel. Ms. Halstead no longer holds employee status at CoreLink Systems. She cannot accept reinstatement. Should your organization wish to engage her expertise, Quiet Seal LLC offers limited licensing of relevant services. Market rate applies. Retainer required. Engagement subject to availability. Every word cut ties. Rewrote the balance. Put me in the position I should have claimed years ago, that night. I sat at my dining table with my laptop and opened a new browser tab. It took 11 minutes to register Quiet Seal LLC legal entity. Mailing address. Pending bank account. The cursor blinked against the white screen as if daring me to doubt it. I didn't. When the confirmation came through, I closed the lid gently and let the quiet of the room settle around me. For the first time in days, I wasn't replaying the humiliation of my photo taped at security. I wasn't hearing the CFO's desperate voicemails. I was thinking only of what it meant to finally own my name, my work, and my worth on my terms. On Monday morning, the email hit every inbox tied to the Macrovia deal. Subject immediate compliance review. Body due to non-compliance under sections 4.7 and 9C. Acquisition is suspended indefinitely. Transaction is considered void until resolution. 4 lines, cold, bureaucratic, undeniable. By 10 o'clock, the news had leaked. Finance blogs picked it up within the hour. Headlines flashing across feeds, $300 merger stalled by compliance breach. CoreLink's stock began to drop like a stone. Each tick a small confirmation that the bridge was gone for good. I didn't need to be in the boardroom to know what was happening. I could picture it Tate standing at the head of the table, his polished grin gone, voice cracking as investors demanded explanations. One of them, a man named Carl, hawk-eyed and sharp, leaned across the table and asked who had signed off on my termination. The silence that followed must have been brutal. By noon, another storm hit. Someone inside CoreLink had leaked the security photo my face taped to the front desk with the words, "Do not let her back on the floor," scrawled beneath it. It landed on LinkedIn with a caption that burned hotter than any press release. "How you treat veterans tells us everything we need to know." It spread fast. Former employees chimed in, clients screenshotted it, even a Macrovia executive hit like, "Public sympathy tilted." The woman they had erased was now the woman people whispered about with respect. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't answer. Kyle wrote, "They're in meltdown. Everyone saw the post. Investors are furious. Tate looks like he's drowning." I set the phone aside and opened the folder still sitting on my table. Clause 9C stared back at me in black and white, the same words that had saved me from invisibility. I traced the ink with my finger. Calm now. It wasn't rage that filled me anymore. It was clarity, written in blue ink, stamped into the record. 2 days after the LinkedIn photo had made its rounds, my doorbell rang just after noon. A courier in a gray jacket stood on the porch holding a small package. No sender name, just a gold seal pressed into the corner. I signed, closed the door, and set the box on my table. The velvet felt out of place in my modest kitchen, almost too heavy for its size. When I lifted the lid, I found a card on thick stationery, the handwriting deliberate and steady. "Next time, they'll know who built the bridge. RM, CEO, Macrovia Group." Beneath it lay a small lapel pin, Macrovia's crest set into silk. Not an offer, not leverage, just recognition, given without strings. My breath caught. For the first time since this all began, tears slipped down my face, quiet and steady, not anger, not vindication. Just the weight leaving my shoulders, proof that someone had finally seen the work that had cost me birthdays, holidays, years. I left the note on the bookshelf beside my fireproof file box. It didn't need framing. Its presence was enough. That same afternoon, 2 emails arrived in the new Quiet Seal LLC inbox. One from a regional hospital system desperate for a compliance overhaul. another from a logistics company whose integration had been limping along for months. Both wanted immediate consultations. I read them twice, then opened the documents Daniel had prepared for me. My hand didn't tremble when I typed my name at the bottom: Corinne Halstead, Principal Consultant, Quiet Seal, LLC. With each signature, something inside me stitched itself back together. I wasn't an employee anymore, the invisible cog behind a curtain of arrogance. I was my own entity, my own terms. When the contracts came back signed, I poured myself a glass of water, sat at the same table where I'd once stared at a cardboard box of office junk, and smiled. The bridge they'd tried to burn now carried me forward, stronger than it had ever been. A week later, another email appeared in the Quiet Seal inbox. The sender line almost made me laugh. Core Link Systems. Their tone was stiff, formal, every word scrubbed by legal. They needed immediate licensing for one of the integration frameworks I'd built years ago, the same framework Tate had once dismissed as obsolete. Without it, they couldn't process vendor data, not even payroll. I read their request twice before forwarding it to Daniel. Within the hour, he returned a clean reply. Quiet Seal LLC offers licensing at 4 times the original contract rate. Retainer required. Engagement subject to availability. There was no protest, no bargaining. Just a wire transfer confirmation and an attached agreement bearing their desperate digital signature. My first official client was the company that had taped my face to a desk like I was a threat. Now, they were paying me for the privilege of access. That morning, I brewed fresh coffee in my quiet kitchen and sat at the desk I'd cleared for this new chapter of my life. Sunlight spilled across the papers neatly stacked beside me, 2 contracts already underway, CoreLink's license sitting on top. My mug warmed my hands as I opened my laptop to find another message waiting. Subject respectfully requesting your terms. I leaned back in my chair, letting the words linger. For years, I had bent to their deadlines, their emergencies, their dismissive nods. My value had been measured in crises averted and hours stolen from my own life. Now, the balance had shifted. I wasn't the ghost in compliance anymore. I wasn't invisible. I closed the laptop slowly, savoring the stillness of the room. My heart felt steady, grounded. I was no longer the employee waiting to be acknowledged. I was the one setting the conditions. I was the terms.